Hey students, it's Mrs. Dukoski. Here we are today for our chapter 2, Catcher in the Rye lesson. So today we're going to read chapter 2, but before we read chapter 2, we're going to just do a couple of other things first, including an option to review chapter 1. So you should have read chapter 1 and watched the chapter 1 video lesson. And then now we're going to get into chapter 2 of Catcher in the Rye. So I'm just going to take a moment to share my screen. I hope everybody's doing well out there. I just wanted to say hello to you, and I'll come back and check in with you at the end of our lesson. So if you have your Schoology pages open, that's going to be useful. And you also probably will benefit from having a Word document in front of you. So I would prepare those things before we begin our lesson. Okay, so here's the screen share. Bear with me. All right, so we have our Schoology up and running. And again, yours might look a little bit different. This is a class from last year because it's just how it has to be when I do this recording. But you will, in your Schoology class, find your Catcher in the Rye folder. And in your Catcher in the Rye folder, you've got all of the information from the chapter 1 lesson, including the online text, including the notes, including the introductory PowerPoint. You'll need this online text again unless you're using your own copy of the text. And you'll also need these chapter 2 notes. So I'm going to open the chapter 2 notes. And these chapter 2 notes are going to get me started. So before we really get started with Catcher in the Rye again, I am a big fan of what I call the be now, not the do now, the be now, which is you taking a couple moments to just kind of get yourself in the right physical, mental, emotional space to be ready to learn and participate in this lesson as an active learner. So I've included for you, and I'll do this a lot, a 5-minute get focused video. This one's a yoga video. It's a little 5-minute yoga routine. I'm a big fan of yoga. I'll do more than just share yoga routines. I'll give you some other tips and tricks just to get us focused before we start. But for today, if you'd like to, and I recommend taking 5 minutes to just get yourself focused and in a place where you're prepared for learning. So you can, and these I'll share in the bottom of the YouTube video comments too, or the YouTube description. There's a nice YouTube video of, it's a get focused routine. So feel free to take 5 minutes, pause this video, go do the get focused routine, come back when you're feeling like you're ready and you have the energy for this lesson, because it is going to take a little while to read the chapter and to talk about it. And there is a writing assignment at the end of it. So with that, I'll pause for a second if you want to do that. Then when you come back into this video, before you get into chapter 2, there's also a chapter 1 review video. So you might want to pause to look at the chapter 1 review video. It's short. It's just going to go over for you the main concepts that we've discussed from chapter 1, and it's helpful. So especially if it's been a couple days since you've been in Catcher in the Rye and thinking about it, go start yourself off with a little chapter 1 review video. So if you'd like to pause and do your chapter 1 review video, and I'll also share this in the YouTube description. Then, here we go. Before we read chapter 2, where Holden's going to be visiting one of his teachers named Mr. Spencer, we're just going to do a little warm up. So he goes into Mr. Spencer's house at the beginning of this chapter. And as he walks into Mr. Spencer's house, he's looking around, and J.D. Salinger, our author, starts off this chapter, and this is a pretty popular way if you're a writer or just as a reader to analyze. Writers often start off chapters by describing something. So maybe they'll describe a setting, or maybe they'll describe a character. One of those 6 major elements that we were talking about, elements of fiction, that's a popular way to start off a chapter, is kind of getting a little bit deeper into one of those elements. And characters and settings are like 2 of the easier ones to describe. So with that, before we read chapter 2, knowing that we're going to be introduced to new character and new setting, why don't you take a moment to just look around the room that you're in? Just as you're sitting here, or maybe you're standing, maybe you're lying down, look around and just start noticing the room as though it was kind of the first time you have like a new set of eyes on it. What do you notice about it? Do you notice any colors, any objects, any details? Look high and look low. Look at all of the walls, the windows, the corners. If there's any furniture, maybe there's other people in the room. Just take a minute to look around the room, noticing any details that maybe you've just haven't taken time to notice in a while or ever before. And think about, what's this look like? Am I seeing colors? Right? And then is there any kind of scent? Do you have any scent in the room? Or maybe there's, the sense of touch or feeling. Maybe you have a blanket on you, it feels soft. Maybe there's an animal with you and you have a nice, lovely dog sitting by your side that you can give a pat or cat or other creature. So what kind of things can you feel? And maybe you're having a snack. Are there tastes in this room? Or sounds, any sounds aside from the, voice of this recording? And just take a moment to really just settle into the space that you're in, noticing all of these sensory images. As you do that, and we're just doing it in our heads right now, that's imagery. So when a writer chooses to describe something using the sensory details of smell, sight, touch, taste, and sound, that is called imagery. A lot of times people reduce imagery to the way something looks because it has the word image in it. But really that's just one part of imagery. It's all of those sensory details. And if you want a little more about imagery, I did put in, and I'll put it in the YouTube description, a little what is imagery in terms of it as a literary technique tutorial video. It's a short one if you want to take a minute and explore imagery a little bit more. But so as we approach chapter 2, and we are going to read it together, just know that the chapter starts off with Holden going into Mr. Spencer's home, and J.D. Salinger, the writer, uses imagery to kind of bring the reader and Holden into this space. So with that said, we're going to go into chapter 2, and I'm going to read chapter 2. So take a moment to open chapter 2. It's on page 4 if you're using the PDF. It has a 2 at the top, but the PDF pages are here. So if you don't know, PDFs, you can actually click in and type the page number up here. So if you were on the first page, it's the beginning of the book, so it's not that hard to scroll. But as we get through, it's sometimes nice to just be able to pop the number in and press enter, and it takes you to the page that we're on. So take a moment, get into your page. We are about to begin chapter 2. So chapter 2 begins, Holden walking into Mr. Spencer's house. Here we go. They each had their own room and all. They were both around 70 years old, or even more than that. They got a bang out of things, though, in a half-assed way, of course. I know that sounds mean to say, but I don't mean it mean. I just mean it that I used to think about old Spencer quite a lot. And if you thought about him too much, you wondered what the heck he was still living for. I mean, he was all stooped over, and he had very terrible posture. And in class, whenever he dropped a piece of chalk at the blackboard, some guy in the first row always had to get up and pick it up and hand it to him. That's awful in my opinion. But if you thought about him just enough and not too much, you could figure it out that he wasn't doing too bad for himself. For instance, one Sunday, when some other guys and I were over there for hot chocolate, he showed us this old beat up Navajo blanket that he and Mrs. Spencer bought off some Indian in Yellowstone Park. You could tell old Spencer got a big bang out of buying it. That's alliteration, all those B's, right? Big bang out of buying. That's what I mean. You take somebody old as hell like old Spencer, and they can get a big bang out of buying a blanket, doubling down on that alliteration. His door was open, but I sort of knocked on it anyway, just to be polite and all. I could see where he was sitting. He was sitting in a big leather chair all wrapped up in the blanket I just told you about. He looked over at me when I knocked. "Who's that?" he yelled. "Caulfield, come in, boy." He was always yelling outside class. It got on your nerves sometimes. The minute I went in, I was sort of sorry I'd come. He was reading the Atlantic Monthly, and there were pills and medicine all over the place, and everything smelled like Vicks nose drops. It was pretty depressing. I'm not too crazy about sick people anyway. What made it even more depressing, old Spencer had on this very sad, ratty old bathrobe, and he was probably born in or something. I don't much like to see old guys in their pajamas and bathrobes anyway. Their bumpy old chests are always showing, and their legs, old guys' legs at beaches and places, always look so white and unhairy. "Hello, sir," I said. "I got your note. Thanks a lot." He'd written me this note asking me to stop by and say goodbye before vacation started, on account of I wasn't coming back. You didn't have to do all that. I'd have come over to say goodbye anyway. "Have a seat there, boy," old Spencer said. He meant the bed. I sat down on it. "How's your grip, sir?" "My boy, if I felt any better, I'd have to send for the doctor," old Spencer said. That knocked him out. He started chuckling like a madman. Then he finally straightened himself out and said, why aren't you down at the game? I thought this was the day of the big game." "It is. I was. Only I just got back from New York with the fencing team," I said. Boy, his bed was like a rock. He started getting serious as hell. I knew he would. "So you're leaving us, eh?" he said. "Yes, sir. I guess I am." He started going into this nodding routine. You never saw anybody nod as much in your life as old Spencer did. You never knew if he was nodding a lot because he was thinking and all, or just because he was a nice old guy that didn't know his ass from his elbow. "What did Dr. Thermer say to you, boy? I understand you had quite a little chat." "Yes, we did. We really did. I was in his office for around 2 hours, I guess." "What'd he say to you?" "Oh, well, about life being a game and all, and how you should play it according to the rules." He was pretty nice about it. I mean, he didn't hit the ceiling or anything. He just kept talking about life being a game and all, you know. "Life is a game, boy. Life is a game that one plays according to the rules." "Yes, sir, I know it is. I know it." "Game, my ass. Some game. If you get on that side where all the hot shots are, then it's a game, all right. I'll admit that. But if you get on the other side where there aren't any hot shots, then what's a game about it? Nothing. No game." "Has Dr. Thermer written to your parents yet?" Old Spencer asked me. He said he was going to write them Monday. "Have you yourself communicated with them?" "No, sir. I haven't communicated with them because I'll probably see them Wednesday night when I get home." "And how do you think they'll take the news?" "Well, they'll probably be pretty irritated about it," I said. "They really will. This is about the 4th school I've gone to." I shook my head. I shake my head quite a lot. "Boy," I said. I also say boy quite a lot, partly because I have a lousy vocabulary and partly because I act quite young for my age sometimes. I was 16 then, and I'm 17 now, and sometimes I act like I'm about 13. It's really ironical because I'm 6'2" and a half and I have gray hair. I really do. The one side of my head, the right side, is full of millions of gray hairs. I've had them ever since I was a kid, and yet I still act sometimes like I was only about 12. Everybody says that, especially my father. It's partly true too, but it isn't all true. People always think something's all true. I don't give a damn except that I get bored sometimes when people tell me to act my age. Sometimes I act a lot older than I am. I really do. But people never notice it. People never notice anything. Old Spencer started nodding again. He also started picking his nose. He made out like he was only pinching it, but he was really getting the old thumb right in there. I guess he thought it was all right to do because it was only me that was in the room. I didn't care, except that it's pretty disgusting to watch somebody pick their nose. Then he said, "I had the privilege of meeting your mother and dad when they had their little chat with Dr. Thermer some weeks ago. They're grand people." "Yes, they are. They're very nice." Grand. There's a word I really hate. It's a phony. I could puke every time I hear it. Then all of a sudden, old Spencer looked like he had something very good, something sharp as a tack to say to me. He sat up more in his chair and sort of moved around. It was a false alarm, though. All he did was lift the Atlantic Monthly off his lap and try to chuck it on the bed next to me. He missed. It was only about 2 inches away, but he missed anyway. I got up and picked it up and put it down on my bed. All of a sudden, then, I wanted to get the hell out of the room. I could feel a terrific lecture coming on. I didn't mind the idea so much, but I didn't feel like being lectured to and smell Vicks nose drops and look at old Spencer in his pajamas and bathrobe all the time, all at the same time. I really didn't. It started all right. What's the matter with you, boy? Old Spencer said. He said it pretty tough, too, for him. How many subjects did you carry this term? 5, sir. 5. And how many are you failing in? 4. I moved my ass a little bit on the bed. It was the hardest bed I ever sat on. I passed English all right, I said, because I had all that Beowulf and Lord Randall, my son's stuff, when I was at the Wooten School. I mean, I didn't have to do any work in English at all, hardly, except write compositions once in a while. He wasn't even listening. He hardly ever listened to you when you said something. I flunked you in history because you knew absolutely nothing. I know that, sir. Boy, I know it. You couldn't help it. Absolutely nothing, he said over again. That's something that drives me crazy. When people say something twice that way after you admit it the first time, then he said it 3 times. But absolutely nothing. I doubt very much if you opened your textbook even once the whole term. Did you? Tell the truth, boy. Well, I sort of glanced through it a couple times, I told him. I didn't want to hurt his feelings. He was mad about history. You glanced through it, eh? He said, very sarcastic. Your exam paper is over there on top of my chiffonier, on top of the pile. Bring it here, please. It was a very dirty trick, but I went over and brought it to him. And brought it to him. I didn't have any alternative or anything. Then I sat down on his cement bed again. Boy, you can't imagine how sorry I was getting that I'd stopped by to say goodbye to him. He started handling my exam paper like it was a turd or something. We studied the Egyptians from November 4th to December 2nd, he said. You chose to write about them for the optional essay question. Would you care to hear what you had to say? No, sir, not very much, I said. He read it anyway, though. You can't stop a teacher when they want to do something. They just do it. The Egyptians were an ancient race of Caucasians residing in one of the northern sections of Africa. The latter, as we all know, is the largest continent in the Eastern Hemisphere. I had to sit there and listen to that crap. It certainly was a dirty trick. The Egyptians are extremely interesting to us today for various reasons. Modern science would still like to know what the secret ingredients were that the Egyptians used when they wrapped up dead people so that their faces would not rot for innumerable centuries. This interesting riddle is still quite a challenge to modern science in the 20th century. He stopped reading and put my paper down. I was beginning to sort of hate him. Your essay, shall we say, ends there, he said in this very sarcastic note. You wouldn't think such an old guy would be so sarcastic at all. However, you dropped me a little note at the bottom of the page, he said. I know I did, I said. I said it very fast because I wanted him to stop before he started reading that out loud, but you couldn't stop him. He was hot as a firecracker. Dear Mr. Spencer, he read out loud. This is all I know about the Egyptians. I can't seem to get very interested in them. Although your lectures are very interesting, it is all right with me if you flunk me, though, as I am flunking everything else except English anyway. Respectfully yours, Holden Caulfield. He put my goddamn paper down and then looked at me like he'd just beaten hell out of me in ping pong or something. I don't think I'll ever forgive him for reading me that crap out loud. I would have read it out loud to him if he'd written it. I really wouldn't. I wouldn't have read it out loud to him if he'd written it. I really wouldn't. In the first place, I'd only written the damn note so that he wouldn't feel too bad about flunking me. Do you blame me for flunking you, boy? He said. No, sir, I certainly don't, I said. I wish to hell he'd stop calling me boy all the time. He tried chucking my exam paper on the bed when he was through with it. Only he missed again, naturally. I had to get up again and pick it up and put it on top of the Atlantic Monthly. It's boring to do that every 2 minutes. What would you have done in my place? He said. Tell the truth, boy. Well, you could see he really felt pretty lousy about flunking me. So I shot the bull for a while. I told him I was a real moron and all that stuff. I told him how I would have done exactly the same thing if I'd been in his place, and how most people didn't appreciate how tough it is being a teacher. That kind of stuff. The old bull. The funny thing is, though, I was sort of thinking of something else while I shot the bull. I live in New York, and I was thinking about the lagoon in Central Park, down near Central Park South. I was wondering if it would be frozen over when I got there, or when I got home. And if it was, where did the ducks go? I was wondering where the ducks went when the lagoon got all icy and frozen over. I wondered if some guy came in a truck and took them away to a zoo or something, or if they just flew away. I'm lucky though. I mean, I could shoot the old bull to old Spencer and think about those ducks at the same time. It's funny. You don't have to think too hard when you talk to a teacher. All of a sudden though, he interrupted me while I was shooting the bull. He was always interrupting you. How do you feel about all this, boy? I'd be very interested to know. Very interested. You mean about my flunking out of Pensy and all? I said. I sort of wished he'd cover up his bumpy chest. It wasn't such a beautiful view. If I'm not mistaken, I believe you also had some difficulty at the Wooten School and at Elkton Hills. He didn't say it just sarcastic, but sort of nasty too. I didn't have too much difficulty at Elkton Hills, I told him. I didn't exactly flunk out or anything. I just quit, sort of. Why, may I ask? Why? Oh, well, it's a long story, sir. I mean, it's pretty complicated. I didn't feel like going into the whole thing with him. He wouldn't have understood it anyway. It wasn't up his alley at all. One of the biggest reasons I left Elkton Hills was because I was surrounded by phonies. That's all. They were coming in the goddamn window. For instance, they had this headmaster, Mr. Haas. That was the phoniest bastard I'd ever met in my life. 10 times worse than old Thurmer. On Sundays, for instance, old Haas went around shaking hands with everybody's parent when they drove up to school. He'd be charming as hell and all, except if some boy had little funny-looking parents. You should have seen the way he did with my roommate's parents. I mean, if a boy's mother was sort of fat or corny looking or something, and if somebody's father was one of those guys that wear those suits with very big shoulders and corny black and white shoes, then old Hans would just shake hands with them and give them a phony smile, and then he'd go talk for maybe half an hour with somebody else's parents. I can't stand that stuff. It drives me crazy. It makes me so depressed, I go crazy. I hated that goddamn Elkton Hills. Old Spencer asked me something then, but I didn't hear him. I was thinking about old Haas. What, sir? I said. Do you have any particular qualms about leaving Pensy? Oh, I have a few qualms, all right. Sure, but not too many. Not yet, anyway. I guess it hasn't really hit me yet. It takes things a while to hit me. All I'm doing right now is thinking about going home Wednesday. I'm a moron. Do you feel absolutely no concern for your future, boy? Oh, I feel some concern for my future, all right. Sure, I do. I thought about it for a minute. But not too much, I guess. Not too much, I guess. You will, old Spencer said. You will, boy. You will when it's too late. I didn't like hearing him say that. It made me sound dead or something. It was very depressing. I guess I will, I said. I'd like to put some sense in that head of yours, boy. I'm trying to help you. If I can. He really was, too. You could see that. But it was just that we were too much on opposite sides of the pole, that's all. I know you are, sir, I said. Thanks a lot. No kidding. I appreciate it. I really do. I got up from the bed then. Boy, I could have sat there about another 10 minutes to save my life. I couldn't have sat there about another 10 minutes to save my life. Thing is, though, I have to get going now. I have quite a bit of equipment at the gym. I have to get to take home with me. I really do. He looked up at me and started nodding again, with this very serious look on his face. I felt sorry as hell for him, all of a sudden. But I just couldn't hang around there any longer. The way we were on opposite sides of the pole, the way he kept missing the bed whenever he chucked something at it, and his sad old bathrobe with his chest showing, and that grippy smell of Vicks nose drops all over the place. Look, sir, don't worry about me, I said. I mean it. I'll be all right. I'm just going through a phase right now. Everybody goes through phases and all, don't they? I don't know, boy. I don't know. I hate it when somebody answers that way. Sure they do, I said. I mean it, sir. Please don't worry about me. I sort of put my hand on his shoulder. Okay, I said. Wouldn't you like a cup of hot chocolate before you go? Mrs. Spencer would be. I really would, but the thing is I have to get going. I have to go right to the gym. Thanks, though. Thanks a lot, sir. Then we shook hands and all that crap. It made me feel sad as hell, though. I'll drop you a line, sir. Take care of your grip now. Goodbye, boy. After I shut the door and started back to the living room, he yelled something at me, but I couldn't exactly hear him. I'm pretty sure he yelled, "Good luck," at me. I hope to hell not. I'd never yell "good luck" at anybody. It sounds terrible when you think about it. Chapter 3. So this is page 9, and that chapter 3 is just kind of hanging there. So we're going to stop our reading at that point, and I'm going to go back to my Schoology notes. Here's my chapter 2. So that's Mr. Spencer, Holden, not feeling at all like he has any real connection left, looking for that goodbye, right? Not really getting what he wants from Mr. Spencer. It's just kind of making him feel even lousier. Mr. Spencer's, what he seems to feel are his good intentions about lecturing Holden about what he should do and conforming in his life and following the rules and just kind of playing the game. Holden doesn't necessarily agree with that, and he says he's just going through a phase, but you know, that's something that's going to keep coming up, whether or not, you know, we conform, play by the rules, play the game, just kind of appease people, or we own what might feel more authentic to ourselves. And Holden struggles with that throughout the story. Do I just kind of play by the rules of the society that I'm in, or do I search and seek for what really feels right for me? And that's part of life, right? That's a human struggle. So with that, we're going to go into the notes and we're going to look here, number 5. All right. So it says in chapter 2, Mr. Spencer reads Holden the essay he wrote on his history final with a personal note included. So here's the note again. It says, "Dear Mr. Spencer, that is all I know about the Egyptians. I can't seem to get very interested in them, although your lectures are very interesting. It is all right with me if you flunk me, though, as I am flunking everything else except English anyway. Respectfully yours, Holden Caulfield." Then Mr. Spencer says to Holden, "Do you blame me for flunking you, boy? And then what would you have done in my place?" Holden says, "No, sir. I certainly don't blame you. I wish to hell he'd stop calling me boy all of the time." Then Holden does something interesting. Holden starts thinking about something else while Spencer's shooting the bull, which means talking a lot. We'll do a whole lesson about what I refer to as Holden speak, all of these catchphrases and slang like this shooting the bull and the word phony, right? We're going to hear phony a lot. He kind of describes what, he gives us an example of a phony person, that Mr. Haas from Elkton Hills. So we'll talk about these in a separate lesson. But these are just, you know, some of the phrases and slang that Holden uses throughout the story. So he says he was shooting the bull, talking with Mr. Spencer, and he starts thinking about something else. And this is what he does. In this paragraph here, I'm not going to reread it, but it's from the story. Look at it again. All right. What's he thinking about? While they're talking and Mr. Spencer's trying to, you know, give this advice to Holden, who's failing out of another school, lecturing him a little bit, Holden starts thinking about this. All right. So take a look at this again. Consider what he's thinking about as he's getting this lecture from Mr. Spencer. And then we're going to write a paragraph. So a paragraph reflection. Why do you think Holden is thinking about something else when Mr. Spencer speaks to him? Why do you think he is thinking about ducks in Central Park South by the lagoon? What coping mechanism might Holden be employing here? Share your ideas in this paragraph. So if you're not sure what a coping mechanism is, you can look it up, and maybe I'll put a little definition in the description of the video. But that's something that we're conditioned to do as humans. We build it in if we're feeling uncomfortable. or we don't know how to express ourselves. We might do something to try to regulate our emotions, because clearly Holden is having emotions in this chapter. He's not in a great place. He's kind of facing an uncomfortable reality as he talks to Mr. Spencer. This becomes his central conflict, or is his central conflict throughout the story, that he's flunked out of school, and it's not the first school that he's flunked out of. So he's having an internal conflict, and he's sort of having to face it and discuss it with this Mr. Spencer character who's really just lecturing him. And so he uses this coping mechanism as they're talking. And I just, that's what I want you, I don't want to give away too much, but that's what I want you to consider as you write your paragraph. Like, why do you think Holden's thinking about something else? Why is he thinking about these ducks? And how is this maybe a coping mechanism for Holden? So again, share your ideas in a little paragraph reflection. There'll be a hand-in on Schoology. 6 to 8 sentences. You don't have to go crazy, but just some of your thoughts about what's happening, particularly in this passage. All right, with that, I'm going to stop the share. Hey, so that's chapter 2. I hope that you enjoyed it. It was a short chapter. We met Holden's history teacher, Mr. Spencer. You have some reflecting to do in a paragraph about that chapter, and reach out to me if you have any questions. We'll be back next time for a chapter 3 lesson and a reading of chapter 3, Catcher in the Rye. So I will see you then. All right, be well. Hope you're all doing well out there. Bye.